Dear students, in the previous classes we have introduced actual growth, warranted growth, and also the problem of knife-edge instability. Now in this class we introduce natural growth rate. Natural growth rate. Remember this, if the economy is growing at a warranted growth rate, then the economy is experiencing balanced growth. But in our discussion, the level of employment has not entered the picture. We cannot define equilibrium growth rate without considering the level of employment. And in a Keynesian type economy, the treatment of growth rate without considering the level of employment is not complete. So we have to introduce the level of employment also to explain the true nature of balanced or steady state growth. Stated differently, full utilization of capital alone is not a sufficient condition for balanced growth. Balanced growth also requires full employment of labor force. Full employment of labor force. So balanced growth means full utilization of capital stock and also full employment of labor force. And full utilization of capital stock is guaranteed if the economy grows at a warranted rate. Assuming that initially the economy was fully employed with respect to capital and also capital output ratio is constant. The acceleration coefficient, all these concepts we have defined earlier. So, in a sense, balanced growth requires both full employment and full capacity utilization. Balanced growth requires full employment and full capacity utilization over time. And to explain this full employment consistent with the balanced growth, we introduce natural growth rate Gn is equal to L dot by L is equal to N. That is delta L by L is equal to N. Gn, natural growth rate, is equal to the rate of growth of the labor force. And given the assumptions of the model, as we have discussed earlier, actual growth, Ga, cannot permanently exceed natural growth because of what is known as the constancy of K by L ratio. So, because of the constancy of the K by L ratio, actual growth cannot permanently exceed. So, we can write Ga less than or equal to L dot by L is equal to N. Remember this, if the economy was initially at full employment, maximum Ga possible is equal to N. But if the economy was not initially at full employment, initially actual growth can exceed natural growth, rate of growth of labor force, but and also some overutilization of labor is possible, but after a point actual growth cannot exceed natural growth because of the assumption that capital labor ratio is constant. So if an economy is originally at a state of full employment, then growth with the full employment over time is ensured if GA is equal to GN. If the economy was originally in a state of full employment, then full employment over time require that GA is equal to GN. So, full employment of both capital and labor require that GA is equal to GW is equal to GM, or GA is equal to GW is equal to N. GA is equal to GW is equal to N, and delta or GA is equal to S by VR is equal to N. So, if the actual growth rate is equal to both the warranted and natural growth rates, the economy will experience both the full employment of capital and also full employment of labor. Full employment of both the capital and labor, a situation called by John Robinson as golden state. A situation called by John Robinson as golden state or a golden age. Golden age. A situation called by John Robinson as golden age. And its definition is, in the form of a definition, the golden age, indicating that it represents a mythical state of affairs not likely to obtain in any real economy. Golden age is a mythical state of affairs not likely to obtain in any economy. That means only a happy coincidence ensures growth which is consistent with the warranted and natural growth rates. Growth consistent with the full employment of labor and full capacity utilization of capital. And in the economy, there is no reason to believe that this S by VR is equal to N. Warranted growth is equal to natural growth, is also equal to actual growth, because S, VR and N, these are all coefficients which are independently determined, and we will say that only a happy coincidence generates steady state at full employment of both the capital and labor. Only a happy coincidence generates full employment of both the capital and labor. This is because saving income ratio is determined by the preferences of the households. N is exogenously determined, rate of force of growth of labor force. VR is determined by the state of technology. So these are all independently determined, and there is no reason to believe that the values of these parameters will be such that GA is equal to GW is equal to N. If a happy coincidence ensures equality between GA, GW and GN, then we can say that the economy will experience growth with the full utilization of capital and full utilization of labor. And if the economy is growing at GW, we will say that it is full capacity growth rate. And if it is growing at GN, we say that it is full employment growth. And growing with the GW equal to GN, full capacity and full employment. Now let us see these discussions in the form of a graph. So before concluding this, let me say there are 3 growth rates defined by Harrod. Economy's growth rate is actual growth rate. The question is whether it is equal to the desired growth rate GW and also the growth rate of labor Gn. If all these growth rates are equal, economy experiences both full employment and full capacity utilization. Now, consider this graph. This is Gn, this is GW, delta y by y is equal to S by VR, delta y by y is equal to N, and this is Ga, delta y by y is equal to S by V. Now, consider this graph. Let us see what happens if GW differs from not equal to Gm. GW differs from Gm. We consider the case first GW greater than Gm. GW greater than Gm. Now, initially GW is equal to Gn. Initially, over time GW is greater than Gn. Gn falls short of GW or GW exceeds Gn. And suppose also that economy is growing at GW. Economy is on the growth path given by warranted growth, not natural growth. Natural growth is below GW. So the question is it possible to attain growth consistent with GW if it is greater than Gm? Initially, this is possible by what is known as by using laborers with extra hour of work, intensive work, etc. Then, over time, maintenance of GW becomes difficult due to shortage of labor, and Ga falls short of GW. Initially, economy is at GW, so naturally Ga is equal to GW up to say T1. Even though Gn is less than GW, it is possible to maintain growth at GW. But beyond T1, growth at GW cannot be possible. So Ga falls short of GW at T1. And if there is such a divergence, this divergence is not self-correcting. It is aggravating, self-reinforcing. And at T is equal to T2, you can see that Ga is less than Gm. At T2, Ga falls short of Gm. So the result is that at T2, labor force will be fully employed. Beyond that, if actual growth falls short of Ga, then unemployment will develop. So the result is initially economy is at GW, but over time growth at GW, that is Ga, cannot be maintained. Then there is a divergence between GW and Ga, but as Gn is smaller than GW, but initially GW can be maintained. That is Ga at GW, but beyond this Ga falls short of GW, that is GW cannot be maintained. And if there is a divergence, the divergence increases over time. There is a shortage of labor and unemployment will be the result. So remember this, if Ga is less than Gn, unemployment will result over time. Now consider another case. Consider another case. This is delta y by y is equal to n, and delta y by y is equal to S by VR. This is Gn, this is GW, suppose. Now in this case, Gn exceeds GW throughout time. That is, labor force growth is always higher than the desired growth rate. So GW can be maintained here. But the problem is unemployment will become very acute over time, or unemployment increases over time. So if GN is greater than GW, growth at GW is possible. That is, actual growth will be equal to GW, desired growth, but over time unemployment will increase. And this may be a possible situation existing in the underdeveloped countries. So this is the Harrod model based on 3 growth rates. And remember, this Harrod model is actually a model explaining the condition for equilibrium growth in a growing economy. And today it is not considered as a growth model. The standard growth model is neoclassical model, which we will discuss later. But this Harrod Domar model has been considerably used, extensively used in the underdeveloped countries for planning purposes by using actual growth. GA is equal to S by V. So if the growth target is fixed in an underdeveloped economy, and if V is also given, then the planners can calculate the saving income ratio to achieve this growth target. And if domestic savings is not sufficient, measures can be taken to attract foreign investors also. Such policies, that is the use of Harrod Domar model in planning, will be discussed as a separate topic. So even though it is not considered as a growth model nowadays, it provides considerable insight about the conditions required for steady state growth in a growing capitalist economy with the full employment of capital and also full employment of labor.